Well, hello and welcome to the Ask Your Father podcast. This is the place to be when your heart's ready to hear the truth. And we do that by sharing true stories because who needs a lie? The truth is always going to serve you better. And I have somebody that I want to introduce you to because this gal is a rock star for the King and the Kingdom. This is my co-host. This is Lisa Lou. Lisa, how are you today?
I'm great, and thank you for the kind words. Rockstar, I like that.
Well, you are. You are. I'm always so happy to take and spend time with you because it's just fun, frankly. And if it's not 2/3 fun, I don't want to do it anyways. So
Me too.
it's life is hard enough without having some fun in between. So we're hoping folks will understand that we are going to be serious about having fun, but we're also going to be serious about transformation and talking about real life heart stuff. So I'd like to take a minute, Lisa Lou, and just talk about how we met and give people some background about why we're doing the show. And just why don't you go ahead and I'll let you kind of set the pace with, your side of the story.
Yeah, you got it. And then I'll pass it back to you to add some areas that I might have missed.
Of course. Absolutely.
So October 2023, we met at a prophetic conference, and I've been on this mission to, just really fully understand God's voice and how he talks to us and all the different ways that he does that. And so you were at the conference, I was at the conference, and it was so fun because it was one of those times where I'm usually this person that will go sit in the same spot all the time. I park in the same spot, I sit in the same spot. So very much a routine. And I remember that last morning of the conference, the Lord told me to go sit on the other side of the room. And so, okay, it was very clear. He said, go. I said, okay. And so I sat in the same row with you, and you and I locked arms. Or eyes, and you were with some friends of yours, I think, that were sitting behind you. But anyway, it was just really neat connection. One that I'd never experienced before, but it was one of those where I was like, he just radiates God's love. And you could see it in your eyes. You could see it in, eventually we ended up doing an activation together, which was a ton of fun. But it was like this immediate friendship that you've referred to as a kingdom connection. And I just love that so much because it feels like we've known each other for a very long time. And it was one of those really sweet, just friendships that just downloaded. And I just feel so blessed by it. So I've enjoyed getting to know you and your wife over the last few months. And we've just really kickstarted a fantastic friendship. So anything you'd want to fill in there that I might have missed?
Well, I got to get back on the screen with you first, I guess. So, it really was. It was just very unique because my wife will tell you, I don't meet a stranger. And so yet I've never really had that connection like you and I did. I mean, literally when we met eyes, it was like so almost ethereal. It's like, who is this person? It's like, I recognize you. I know you. I mean, like intimately. It was just like this. And even when I came over, I said, hey, do you want to do this activate with me? It was like, you just looked up and just smiled. Yeah. And it was like, God, I feel like I'd known this person forever. And then as we started to visit, it just came into focus about there's this principle that I speak of, and you've heard me talk about this many times as we've shared many things in our discovery of why we connect so well. And that is that water seeks its own level, and knowing now your story, which you're going to share some of today, and my story, which I've shared bits and pieces of with you, it's like, wow, we have this commonality. We both came out of this place of desperation, and it was all around identity issues and making poor choices. And just, and then as we started peeling back the layers and looking at your childhood and my interspersing with some of my stuff, we realized, wow, there's some real substance here. it kind of explained where that connection came from. And I just follow where the Lord leads me. That's just what this is about for me. And that led up to basically saying, hey, would you be interested in doing this podcast? Because I think people need to hear the heart of the Father, which you and I both seem to really appreciate how we've been redeemed. And so with that, I guess I'd say, how about you go ahead and share part of your story, maybe childhood on up to wherever you feel you want to pass it back to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
So I am excited to share my journey. And I think that if there's anything else that I've learned so far is that when you say yes to Jesus, man, get ready because it's going to be a wild ride. It's going to be hard, and yet it's going to be amazing because what's so different about it is that, I don't know about you all, but sometimes we all make decisions because we make the best decisions ever, right? And how about following the Lord and asking Him first sometimes, right? And being in a community of people that you can really dive in and talk about stuff that comes up because it absolutely comes up, right? We're not born perfect, we don't stay perfect, and we certainly won't exit perfect. So I now my journey is very unique to me, and in the way that the Lord has worked with me is unique to my heart and the way that I'm wired and the way that He wired me as well. So it's just really, really sweet. And some amazing things have happened over my lifetime, and especially one of those being my son, who's now 16. He's just such a blessing. And so where I'll start is I'll go back to the beginning of um, of when I was created. So my parents met at Baylor, and my mom was from Dallas, and my dad was from a small farming community. So I kind of laugh and say, "Well, that's city meets country." So you get Lisa, which is a product of a Baylor Bear, I guess. So I definitely bleed Baylor Bears for sure. I certainly cheer for them, but only child, my mom said I was enough, so I think that I'll take that as a compliment in these years, but I always longed to have brothers and sisters, and luckily for me, I grew up with a family that had a lot of kids, so they had at least 5, and then they adopted a couple more, so they had 7 at some point, but I always had something to do somewhere. I was over there, they were over at my house, and so we definitely had a great, great friendship. And the sad part for me was that they got a new job. The husband got a new job offer and they had to move when I was in elementary school. So I was rather lost. My whole built in family system next door left. And luckily for me, though, my parents had a community of friends. So I had 4 or 5 different family groups that I was had friendships with, and have a couple of surrogate moms as well, which is fantastic. But our routines, we were First Baptist Church. Anytime the doors were open, we were there. Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday. Huge love for Jesus. I accepted Christ when I was 9. I was out. My mom and I were out visiting my godparents in Arizona, and I just pushed and pushed. I could feel the Lord knocking, and I was like, I want to invite Jesus into my heart. So I did around the age of 9. All of my early activities that I remember going, no vacations, but we did go hit all the Baylor football games, basketball games. My dad was absolutely a workaholic. He was taking care of my grandparents who lived again on the farm, took care of them. He was farming, working he ran a rehabilitation center for kids with disabilities, which was just such a loving and caring job, but always working. And really into that caretaker role, right? And so I spent a lot of my early childhood with my dad at the farm. He'd be off doing hard work, and I'd be rolling around on my 3-wheeler or trying to get on the horse, Tarzan, who would sit every time I'd sit on him. but but lots of imagination, spending time with my grandma, my grandpa, and I remember those just being really special times just very early on. I would drive the car home. I'd be able to steer on the way home, sitting next to my dad. And but really after that, dad and I, it was not very sticky. So he and I, especially I'm sure going into middle school, it was just not as connected. So he was not an affectionate man at all. Maybe a side hug here or there. And I really, as a child and even as an adult, never heard "I love you." He That was just something that he just never said to me, and had to come to terms with it. I think I certainly built up some resentment for it, and over the years, as I understood as I got older, that other people were hearing that from their father, and I just wasn't. I knew he loved me by the things he did for me, but he just couldn't emote of any of that. So, um, on the flip side, I grew up super close to my mom. I watched her be a really great daughter to her mom, and I have to share that my mom, I'm still just so blown away as I'm continuing to find out some of the things about her life. But it's super hard for me to fathom all the things she went through as a child. But she starting at the so my grandparents got married, and then my grandfather's parents moved in with them right after they got married. So I remember my mom saying that her grandfather was her best friend. He made her laugh, and they had some health issues, so they were staying with my mom and her parents. And at the age of 4, my great grandfather died, and so that kind of started this myriad of tragedy right after that. So then the next year, the house burned down to the ground. And that's at the age of my mom was at the age of 5. And then at the age of 9, and luckily they all made it out. They just lost every single thing. And then at the age of 9, my grandfather passed from a heart attack. And within 24 hours, my great grandmother found out that her daughter died also in a tragic accident in California. So, my great grandmother, living with my mom and my grandmother, lost her husband and her 2 kids, and within a short period of time of 5 years. And so my mom talks about this intense sadness in the house. I can't even imagine. And even with my grandmother, true, probably trying to even just absorb losing her husband as that. So my mom and my grandmother really developed this sort of trauma bond, so to speak. I think that's probably what we call it today, but there's very much a deep dependency on each other. And then not too long after that, my mom, um, later in her adult years, uncovered that there had been some abuse, making it hard for her to connect with men. Um, so, mom and I, thick as thieves together. My dad kind of off to the side, farming, working, etc. Mom very controlling ish. I hate saying that about her, but really she was. I've got this relationship with my dad where I don't know if I'm priority. I don't, with my mom, I'm not really sure if I am enough, doing enough, saying enough, look right, talk right, say the right things. And so I'm just sort of being ping ponged in this confusion state, so to speak, growing up with my family, starting out. So, John, I don't know if you have any thoughts around that or if you can relate to some of the things that I'm saying there too.
Well, I always find it very interesting. One of the things that we do through the Outcast Network is the Reset Workshop, which I'm hoping you're going to get to go through soon.
Yes.
And one of the things we look at is the influence of the generational baggage that comes with our family. And so it's very interesting as you are starting about, where about your childhood, you're doing the right thing. You're looking at what was the stage that was set for you
Mhm.
in regard to what did your parents have that they were passing off to you, and what was the atmosphere like? And man, it really is. It really is a huge contributor. We're not even talking about getting into generational sins. We're just talking about cultural family dynamics and stuff that people bring into the forefront of raising their kids. And so, what's interesting, and I know you appreciate this, is that the older we get, and as we walk through our own struggles and our own failings, we start to realize, we start to have grace for our parents.
Yes.
You start to realize,
I
it's
mean,
like, oh my goodness, this life stuff is hard, and I make a lot of mistakes, and it's not easy to get back on your feet and to overcome some of these things. And man, you don't even see some of this stuff coming. You don't even know where it's coming from. And then, but obviously, you're sharing some really background stuff, and people are probably scratching their head going, what's that got to do with her story? Oh, everything.
yeah.
And it'll unfold if people be patient. Hopefully we don't have the microwave mentality listeners today. We have people who are going to engage in the relational element of your transparency, which I just want to, as always, I'm always impressed by how you are willing to be really transparent. I don't know what the other word is, vulnerable even, per se, of, with what you've experienced and how you've perceived things. And it's always with an open hand. I love that about you. But yes, I do have to say, for myself, much the same. I found myself in that place of struggling with identity issues because of the things that were communicated, the things that weren't communicated, the absence, either physically or emotionally, and how that set the stage for how I perceived myself. Because being a kid, you always think you're the problem. And so, and you don't even know how to ask questions because you're a kid.
Right.
And who are you going to ask? You just kind of think, well, this is the way it is, which, in a sense, it really is that way. It's that's as you laid it out right up front, you were like, this is your story. This is what happened in your life. So I don't want to go down too many rabbit trails, but I do want to just say, I think you've done a great job of laying out the groundwork so people can appreciate the next portion of your story. So I'm going to hand it back to you.
Yep. So the meat and potatoes, right? Yeah. So again, mom, have this dynamic with my mom. I've got my dad who's present in the house and not necessarily that loving and nurturing father that I needed. And what's interesting to me is that, also growing up. So for me, growing up was very much a tomboy. Back then, I understood this message that, for a lot of farm towns, families um, love to have boys because these young men can grow up and they can help farm. And so I think at some point they had wished for a boy. So I think I picked up on that as well. So I thought, well, I'm kind of battling. Do I really fit in it? Was I what they wanted? That was some of the stuff I think that kind of ran through my head. But as I transitioned into middle school, I knew that if I was going to be popular, which somehow became important to me, or accepted in friendships, that I needed to be a little bit more girly. So I started working on that. I lost weight. I began caring about clothes and all that kind of fun stuff. And then became popular with all the, doing all the sports and connecting with any type of sport that I could play as a female. I was doing it. I was active in church programs, slumber parties, toilet paper, frozen pizzas in the middle of the night. My mom used to complain about that because we'd burn the house down with frozen pizzas. But sneaking out at night to talk to boys, not doing anything bad, but talking to boys. And then my Then off to high school, fell in love with this guy who I met in summer track. He was fantastic and also older. So he was getting ready to go off to college. And so we sort of maintained this long distance um, relationship and saw each other certainly when we could. And then he goes off to college, and it really, my heart just breaks because I really liked him. And he was a huge, part of who I thought, sort of checked all the boxes as a Christian. He was, he also threw the javelin and discus and all the things, very athletic. And to me, he sort of fit and we had great conversations, super, super smart. So he goes off to college, that sort of ends. And what's interesting is that of all places, so we, we, same sex started entering in my story in high school, and it wasn't where you'd expect. It wouldn't be in the sports that I was playing and the friendships that I had there, but it happened in the church. And one of my dear friends in the church, it was odd, and I don't know how it happened, but it did. And we would both be dating guys, and then behind the scenes there was a little bit more. And so that same sex attraction, just, friendships into, I don't know, it just really confusing feelings back then, and I didn't have anybody to talk to about it. But I knew that, especially back then, we did not at all talk about same sex attraction. There was no. That was very much, there was not a club for it. There were not any discussions about it. And I just I felt like I was so desperate for somebody to talk to about this because I needed to talk about why am I feeling this way and what's going on in my heart. And I just felt like I needed to share it with somebody. So I had been in a Bible study for a number of months and just really got to be good friends with this woman and her husband. They both led the Bible study. But one day I got the courage to share with her about what was going on. And I'll never forget, we were in the backyard and chit chatting, laughing. And then I finally mustered up the conversation with her to share with her that I was feeling these feelings for my friend. And I won't forget the day. It was I got a reaction that I never ever dreamed would have ever come forward. And it was, she started flipping, she got her Bible out, she started flipping the pages. Her whole affect changed, her whole demeanor to me changed. And it was like a light switch went off. And she, like, Lisa, you can't do this. This is sinful. This is, you have, like, it was the worst thing I could have ever done or said. And I just remember just that feeling crushed and just sort of, oh my gosh, what did I do? I'm so mortified. I'm so embarrassed. And ooh, it's going to sort of start it up right now. Um, just really locking up. And I lost a friend that day. She never spoke to me again. I still haven't talked to her all these years. And so I knew that I couldn't tell my story. And I ended up going off to college. I got a track scholarship, thank the Lord, because we didn't have money for me to go to school. But I got a track scholarship and ran off to college, and I'm dating guys, and I'm not getting into church again. Or I couldn't really find a church that just really fit my heart. And I worked at a Christian bookstore, and so I remember ordering this book around homosexuality, and I thought I'm going to secretly take it home and read it. Um, and this will cure me from what's going on right now. And so I remember being out at track practice, and I took the book with me and I called on a payphone in the stadium, and I was met again with a similar experience like I did with, my friend, and it was "This is sin, this is shameful, you've got to run away from this and repent," and I just there again, I locked up again, and I just remember hanging up the payphone and thinking, I don't know what to do with any of this." And, I think that it was just a transition in my life. So I carried on for the next, few years in this tension of knowing in my heart that I needed to talk about this with somebody and loving the Lord, loving him so much and just feeling this disconnection. Who sees me? The rejection. Um, Nobody hears me right now. And I just felt just lost, so to speak. So, John, I don't know if I'll transition for a second over to you for a minute.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. That's so powerful that you willing to be, as I shared earlier, transparent. And I can really identify with being in that place where, I was struggling with the thought life I had. I was struggling with the choices I was making. I was struggling with shame. Oh my gosh! When I was growing up, uh, my mom used to. She would say, "Shame on you, John Randolph. Shame on you." Well, I'm going to tell you right now, parents, be careful what you say over your kids, because I absolutely had shame all over me.
Mm.
I certainly can identify with being in the shadows. I can identify with being in a place where honestly, I felt trapped. I felt like I had no place to go. I felt like I could never talk to anybody about the things I was struggling with. And I knew that if I did talk about it, that it was going to cost me. And so I hung on for a long time, and it just seemed to just continually take and withdraw from me any sense of true self and any sense of peace. It's like, it was really interesting. I was like kind of disconnected within. I had this external life where everybody thought I was, a good dad, a good husband, a good person, good businessman. And what I was good at was playing the game, because inside I was empty. I was a dead man walking.
Yeah.
And it just brought me to the place where I got the gift of desperation. And I cried out to God. Unfortunately, I didn't have the relationship with God that you did. And I'm so grateful that you did have that anchor. My bride was that way. When I first met Cynthia, the Lord actually used me to bring her back to him. And it was my honor, my privilege. I was only about a year and a half in my relationship with the Lord. I was 33 when I got saved. So I don't think I was even 35 yet. And I was on furlough from prison, and met her, and just didn't know her, but I just said, "Hey, Cynthia, come here." And she walked over. I said, "Lord says, he loves you, and he just wants you to come home to him." I didn't know that she knew Jesus from Geronimo. I didn't know she had any history. I did not know this woman. And I just, I was able to speak those words, and it went right through that curtain of darkness that she was behind, struck her in the heart. She just started weeping and just saying, "How did you know? How did you know?" And I'm like, I'm freaking out because I don't know what I'm saying. I'm just, I was operating out of the Spirit of God working through me. And I said, all I know is that God said to tell you that. And she's like, I walked away from him 18 years ago. She had gotten an abortion. She'd gotten involved in a relationship that to her was shameful. I mean, she grew up sort of like you, good Southern Baptist family. We don't talk about these things. You don't tell your parents because, oh my gosh, you'd be mortified. They'd reject you. You'd be, ostracized. And it was just easier for her to leave her Bible on the shelf, go out and get all the alphabet behind her name to support her identity in the world rather than have a relationship with the Lord that was going to free her from this, because that really wasn't the religion that she was taught. And that's kind of why I think we're here, is because we want people to understand that the Jesus that you and I now know is a Jesus who says, I love you no matter what. And I love you too much to leave you where you're at. And I have answers for all your questions, and they're all in me. And you're okay with me, but you need to be in me to get on the other side of this. You can't do this without me. And, I came to the end of myself by literally getting on my knees. And in the faith that I saw other people have with God was the faith I said, I either need you to deliver me or take me out. And I was like serious. It's like, I can't go on living like this anymore. I can't go on being an adulterer. I can't go on being an abuser. I can't go on being this living lie, because I knew evil had taken control of me. And I knew that there was, evil is no respecter of person. No respecter of person. And I knew that my daughter would end up being victimized by my evil nature. And I knew that I was basically serving Satan, straight up. And before I came to Jesus, I had a lot more of interaction and insight and experiences, encounters with darkness. And I understood that world very well. And it influenced me. And because I agreed with it, I was acting in it. And I still had to take and stand accountable for the choices I made. It cost me everything. But I'll tell you right now, it was the best thing I ever did. Mm-hmm. It was worth losing 2 professional licenses. It was worth taking and going through a divorce. It was worth going through bankruptcy. It was worth going through being homeless. It was worth, incarceration. It was worth all the time I had to spend proving myself as being a redeemed man of God. Mm-hmm. And that's part of my message is like redemption. My wife says it so well. She says, some people's sins are public and other people's sins are private. Mm-hmm. And God's got them both covered. And I'm at the point in my life where it's like, I really don't care what other people think. I just care about what he thinks. This is why I'm doing this. I'm not doing this for money. I'm not doing it for glory. All glory goes to God. End of the story. What he did for me, he can do for anybody. If he can do it for me, he can do it for anybody. So anyways, that's a part of my story. I don't know how much further we want to go before we go to the next show, because I know there's a lot to your story, and we're up to that place, I did want to talk about we talked about this as a jump off point earlier, and that is that you talked about getting that book and reading the book and calling the number on the book, and it's like you did all of that, kind of in the shadows, kind of reinforcing the fact that you had shame about your circumstance. Yeah. And you also were kind of, people don't want to hear this, but you were exercising deviant behavior, which people don't want to talk about that. They think it's either about sex or they think it's about, gender issues. It's like, well, if you stop and think about what evil looks like, it's deviant, it's perverse, it's problematic. And you were walking in a very confused state, just like I was back then. And bless God, we're not who we were. But I read a book. My dad had a library in his music room. He's a professional musician. And so I used to go in there as a kid, you're always exploring. And there was this book. It's like everything you ever wanted to know about sex, but never dared to ask. And I read that book and it blew my mind because it was talking about things that no child should ever hear about. And it basically lowered the gateway or opened the gateway to experimenting and anticipating and exploring in areas that no child should go. And it set the stage for, pure perversion. And I just, next thing I knew, I was walking a double life. I was going to parties where I had friends that were gay and bi, and we're hanging out, and I'm just kind of playing the fringes. I liked all the attention, and I appreciated all the acceptance that was within that community. And yet I was, I had relationships. I had places where I went beyond, beyond the appropriate boundaries, and it just really kept me in a swirl for years. It really did. And so, when we talk about meeting and having that eye to eye and having that sense of commonality, I think it's a two-edged sword. On one hand, I see that we both came through a very the word of God talks about all sin being common to man. In other words, we're not supposed to be judging one another's sin. We're supposed to recognize that we're struggling against our flesh and the sin nature that we were birthed into, but we're also struggling against powers and principalities that are real. They're still real now. They weren't stories in the Bible. They're very real now. And they influence us. They whisper. They tell us things about ourselves that we have doubts, and they're like, oh, doubts where it all started to come apart in the Garden of Eden. It's exactly what happens when we start doubting ourselves, doubting God, doubting our parents, doubting our, it's like, oh my goodness. So we got a lot more to unpack, but I just want to say, in this world that we live in right now, where kids can pick up their cell phone and they can go places. If this had been around when you and I were kids, oh my goodness, can't even imagine. I would have been off the rails, for real. So, anyways, I just wanted to just say, careful what you read, careful what you leave around for your kids. People need to take and pay attention, because all of this stuff influences and impacts, and the words you're saying over your children, all of these things are huge impactors and influencers, and we have a responsibility to take and we're going to be accountable for this. The day will come. Unless
what doors are we opening?
Yeah, absolutely. And the good news is we can shut the door on these things. We can renounce the things we said. We can repent for those things. We can take and clean that mess up simply by applying the good news of God, which is like, hey, I paid for that. If you want to just give it to me, I'll take care of it. Thank God.
Yes. Amen.
But I don't want to get preachy. There's one thing about this podcast. I'm not telling people how to talk. They need to share their story the way they are. But I just hope that people, as they're listening, will hear the Father's heart in this, that we are just truly wanting to take and reflect the hope and also the joy of the journey. That what we have. Listen, man, I've been married 30 years last week. 30 years. And what a blessing. And I had 2 failed marriages prior to that. And just, and they came out of that place of confusion. They were not of the Lord. And boy, is there a difference. Man. So, anything else you want to add for today before we jump off?
No, I guess just in parting for right now, I think that, there are moments where I get a little anxious about sharing my story sometimes. And then I realized that the journey that I've been on is the sweet reflection too that I'm doing with Holy Spirit, is to look back and just understand how, our parents did the best we could. I'm doing the best I can right now, and that there is so much redemption that can be done here on this earth. And my number one desire is I want to grasp everything God has for me. I want to have the most healed heart I can have possibly on this earth, and not get up to heaven and go, oh my gosh, I could have had this, I could have had that. And, I don't want to miss out on anything. And
Yeah.
God has done so much. He continues to do so much through me.
Yes.
And sometimes just sharing your story provokes a thought in somebody because really it does take looking back to be able to. We all want to know, why do I respond this way? Why am I acting this way? What is it that I believe? What's my beliefs? What's my purpose? There's so many questions we have about the way we walk in this earth today. And I think that there's just a sweet opportunity with the Lord to do that and get things unlocked and unraveled, and root systems pulled up that were never intended to grow.
Right.
And pull those weeds. And healing is health. Healthy things grow, period.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to share the story, and I really hope that God's just redeemed so many beautiful things in my life. I pinch myself sometimes because it's just been so good. It continues to do that. And I hope that it encourages you along the way too, because that's my number one thing, is that I want each and every one of you to feel like you've got a place to come and share and talk through your struggles.
Yes.
And to feel alive, and for God just to shake up these systems that never intended to grow and replace them with what should. So.
Yeah, so good. So very good. Well, thank you, Lisa. You did an amazing job sharing today. I know folks who are, being real with themselves are going to want to come back and catch the rest of the story. And, as I say on our JR Reels, y'all come back. We always got more. So we thank you for joining us today. Lisa, bless you. Till next time. And folks, just remember, this is the place where you can be real, and where we're going to be real in our love for you and the way that we honor what you're going through. So come back, join us again, and God bless.